Yeah.
So it's okay. We'll get another one. I'll like order another one from the rental company. That's your desk now. You can have it. Because I mean, the last thing I wanted was like Coke all over the film. It's like it would ruin it. You'd have to get reprints.
Well,
So
I used to interview adult starlets from the golden age of
porn.
porn, and the stories that some of them told me, they never told me the name of the director or producer
Yeah.
or whoever. But you had a, I knew, um, but it was just like the stuff that they would ask to be done, and the girls, they were always kind of like, they would always say, I could have easily just said, not for me, see ya. And the stuff that they would make them do was crazy. Like you would just
Crazy.
sit there and go, but the few that I talked to, they were like, that's just the way it was back then. It wasn't
Yeah.
like today. Like, and they never felt, uh, they never conveyed that they were, they knew why they were there.
Right. They weren't oppressed or forced into it. It was like
Yes.
people
And
joined
that,
up
that
and got
like,
on the bus.
yes.
No, I had a taste of that. I was up in San Francisco for a couple of them. Like from that Israeli guy that I mentioned, he knew some people that were in the Israeli mafia, and there was a at some point in time, I think we're talking about the late '70s now. I ended up with him in San Francisco, and there were on a picture that John Holmes was doing. Actually, we started in LA. The reason why we had to go to San Francisco is John Holmes was a police informant. And John Holmes was like this weird, gnarly guy that was like always saying, like, the cops are around us, the cops are around us. And everyone
Right.
thought, wow, you're just like really drugged out, dude, relax or whatever. They aren't. But the funny thing is they were, because he was providing information on everything that everybody was doing.
Yeah.
But these Israeli guys were really sharp because they had like when they filmed something, they would immediately take it out of the camera and like a courier would bring it to another location. There was when Holmes pulled the chain down and this bust happened with the LA Vice Squad barged into like three separate locations. I was an AD on this stuff, like
You were?
yeah. Yeah, I knew how to AD, so like it was money. It was like in between other jobs. So he just said, it's like I don't know, it's like a week shoot or something like that. And yeah, I thought it was kind of fun because I would like help these girls die. Yeah, at that time, they actually had dialogue. I mean, these were like real feature films that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. They
That's
weren't,
true.
yeah, they weren't written well particularly, but they actually wanted the girls to try to pretend to be, I don't know, a salesman or something, whatever,
Yes.
whatever the shtick was. So I would try to rehearse with them and get their lines together, and
Right.
it was pretty wild because most of them just wanted to fuck. So
Yeah.
it was like I was constantly trying to fight with them about learning their lines, and they were constantly trying to just pull my pants down or whatever. So it was amusingly crazy. But
Oh man.
so John Holmes, yeah, he brought these cops in, but they couldn't really bust anybody because all the film was gone. It was off location. So and it was this thing called, what was it, Taxi Girls, I think was the name of that particular one. And people also called in, like, not only did John Holmes report this, but it was downtown in a warehouse, and they had these pink taxis driving around the ghetto. And
Oh,
the people in the ghetto called the cops because they said they didn't know all these white guys in pink taxis were. So they came in, they closed the whole thing down. So then everyone moved to San Francisco. So San Francisco was this weird kind of wacky town where
yeah.
all of this,
Everybody I've talked to say that that's how San Francisco was.
yeah, it was all kind of centered around the Mitchell's Brothers, theater on O'Farrell Street, where like all the actresses did like live shows in between, like, working on the films. And I was hanging around Jamie Gillis and Serena and a couple of other people at that time.
What
And
was Jamie Gillis like?
he was really nice. He was actually very smart. He was like an educated guy. He'd been to the university and everything. He had a very wild side to him, but he liked to talk about, politics, philosophy, all kinds of things.
Yeah,
And
like it's very weird that some of these guys that they wanted to be in mainstream movies.
yeah, he wanted to be in a mainstream movie, but
And
he could never break it through on that.
yeah,
And Serena was just she was having these struggles with, like, she had a little daughter that she was having a custody dispute with her husband, who was trying to take the daughter away with a net haven. And that she was working at the O'Farrell, but then she would come home and try to be a mom. And it was like working class life in some ways, although they
right,
led a very weird bohemian life in these, because people had these sort of big apartments in San Francisco that would have, up on North Beach and everything, that would have like 5, 6 bedrooms. And so everyone was in a different bedroom. You know what I'm saying? You
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
all lived in the same thing, like a co-op or whatever. And people came, people went, and it was like a Marx Brothers, sexy Marx Brothers movie in
yeah.
some sort of weird way.
Oh, and if you don't know who the Marx Brothers are, please watch them.
Yeah, it was just very, very like people coming and going and doors opening and closing and people getting into flings with other people. It was quite strange. And I was there actually waiting for this cocaine dealer who wanted to launder his money in porn, and he had promised these Israeli people that I knew that he was going to deliver $1 million to make a feature film. And so he was paying us to like wait there until he got the money together. And he never did, because different things, like, he would happen where his ships would get busted, or something bad would happen to something else, and he'd lose his cargo, and then he'd start over again. But he always, like, paid us to, like, sort of maintain an office there where we were ostensibly in pre-production.
Wow,
And
that's
finally I
incredible.
told them, like, this isn't, like, really good for you. I mean, first, I mean, I also am sort of getting restless in that I can't just wait forever, for you to, like, deliver money to make this thing, because I don't really, like, necessarily want to live in San Francisco and be in the porn business.
Right.
That's not my ambition, you know.
Have you been on set where they've done it?
Oh yeah.
Didn't
All
that
the,
freak you out?
no, not really.
No, I
It
think
just
that would
it
have
just it just smelled kind of strange after a while when too many people had sex.
it what?
But smelled kind of
Oh,
musty or
smell
something.
like ass. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
whoa.
yeah. It was just like a lot of
Especially
people.
when John Holmes showed up, it would just be like a freight train showed up, you know?
Yeah, it was. We had. Yeah, no, it was. I don't know. That didn't particularly bother me at the time. I don't know. I mean, I had slept with a lot of those girls, so I just didn't. I didn't care really one way or the other. So I just. I mean, for me, it was just. It wasn't particularly romantic, or of any kind. I mean, if you saw too much of that, I think it would actually desensitize you
Yes,
to
yes.
the sex act after a while. Luckily, I wasn't there for that long. So
I
finally, this guy that had the money, like, I said to him, like, we need to see the money, or else it's like we're gone. So he said, go to, like, the St. Francis Hotel or whatever. I made a reservation there, go in a hotel room, and these guys came in with, like, shopping bags with food on top, and took the food off, and they had like $1 million in the shopping bags, and these goons, South American goons, and they said, Eric says he wants you to count it. I said, what do you mean? He said, count it. So they meant business. So I actually had to count $1 million in this hotel room in order for him to, like, save face and prove that he wasn't full of shit. So
wow.
yeah, it's a lot harder than you might think.
Oh
It's
God,
like,
I can't even
I mean, it's a lot of hundreds. I mean, it's just you get
you
your
can't
fingers tired.
you counted to a million, you
A
counted a
million,
million bucks?
$1 million. They wouldn't let me out of there until I did. That was my punishment
Oh,
for not believing in them.
oh wow.
Yeah. So I knew he was serious, but he still had distribution problems and other things that would come up. So anyway, I said, okay, we'll wait a while longer. He was this very fat, jolly guy. He loved going down and eating at Fisherman's Wharf and giving waitresses $200 tips. And I mean, really, really nice guy. But he freebased, and I told him, you should not be using this product, like, because you're overweight and you're short. I'm saying, and this is like bad for your heart. I'm saying, I mean, I could have had all of it that I wanted, but I didn't want it, because I had tried it like once or twice, and I'd been up for like 36 straight hours or something. It was like I couldn't go to sleep. I
Right.
was like, this is like the last thing I really need,
Yeah.
So, but so he married some Swedish girl in the porn business that was like 17 years old, and did that, and he had a heart attack
Yeah, of
and
course.
died. And his partners came and they took everything. They left enough money for him to have a wake and a funeral.
Oh, wow.
And so we went to the wake and the funeral, and then we drove back to LA. That was the
You even warned him, telling him, you
I
got to
did.
go.
I did. I could see it coming. I don't know. I had like some kind of prescient thought there. It just seemed like the warning signs were there, and it didn't take very long either. So that was it. And then I never was in that business again. We drove back to LA and the rest of my life, and it just
Did that ever cost you jobs, like where people go? Because I remember.
well, I never no I could actually I never even talked about it. I mean,
Okay, good.
I'm telling you about that because I'm retired and it doesn't
Right.
really matter. I'm just saying, but I never told. Occasionally something that would come up, and I knew someone well enough I could say that, and like really, because there was a certain cachet at parties and things to know some of these people, and sometimes I'd see them when they would come into LA, like, but generally I compartmentalized that and completely kept that away from
Yeah, because
any other part of the
I
business.
I remember seeing an interview where Barney Miller, the one police officer, they replaced him the next day because they found out he did adult movies. So they immediately, and nobody would have known, like nobody would have known because it was, you gotta remember, you're talking 1976. So for somebody to know, somebody knew, I guess somebody ratted him out and said, oh, that guy, he did an adult movie, but he was an actor. And it cost him being on Barney Miller, and he played, I can't remember which character, but anyways, they replaced him, and it just said, like, um, there was there was always a stigma of all, like, you can't have, like, you hear of women now, that they think that that's their doorway into Hollywood,
Nah,
and I'm like, it's not
it's a world unto itself.
yeah,
Although at that time it had pretensions of being Hollywood. It's not even really that anymore at all. I mean, there's sort of like, like the peep show circuit. I mean, there's different levels, I would say, of of that business, even at that time, from, the peep show circuit. I mean, I was dealing with people that were doing complete feature films for, $500,000 or more, and that had storylines and everything to them. And they were kind of, those people that were in that niche there had pretensions of it actually kind of rising to another level where they would probably get into like regular film, sort of like, I don't know, the guy with what was Bob Guccione and Caligula or
oh,
whatever, you know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah.
Like there was sort of a nexus point where some stuff might just cross over, but it didn't really. And yeah, I mean, I think most of those people either abandoned that idea and went and got into regular filmmaking, or just became video pornographers
Right,
because
right.
video took over the
Well,
business.
once
And it was just
video, it seemed like it was like,
mass produced stuff, sex scenes,
yeah.
basically. It didn't have any artistic pretensions
No,
whatsoever.
well, there was a famous scene in, what was it, Boogie Nights, where Burt Reynolds' character just said, the budget. Like, what do you mean? I used to have a budget. Now all they want is just the girl here, the guy here, and that's it. There's no story, there's nothing, so um in that, it was, sadly, that's just the way, you know I enjoyed the old, the storyline, even as cheesy as it was, I didn't care. I thought it was kind of neat to have this ridiculous storyline.
Well, you have to
But
remember that most of those things were being shown in theaters at that time. I
yeah,
mean, there were
yeah, yeah,
chains, the Pussycat, and I mean, the mob owned most of them, but I'm just saying they were like legitimate theaters
yeah,
that people would go to. Some people would, depending on the neighborhood and the time and the place. I mean, couples went out on dates to go see those things. It was a different time.
right.
It's almost a struggle sometimes to like think about what the 60s and 70s were like, in the current era, because it seems like another world a long, long time ago, and it's
Yeah,
far, far away.
that to me, I was never in your shoes, but as somebody that grew up in that time, it was very, I don't know, it's just so much simpler, it just seemed like, uh I don't know, it was a nicer time. Like, that's what it just seemed to me. It just, like I could get a hold of you if I have your number, I could call you,
Yeah,
no problem. But
right.
back then, I could hide from you if I wanted to.
I used to hitchhike across the United
Yeah,
States.
well, yeah,
I mean, it was like, I'd go from here to up to Portland, Seattle, and then over to New Jersey, and like, I would see, yeah, so if I was unlucky, I'd get stuck in Wyoming for 2.5
yeah,
days in a cornfield waiting for a ride or
yeah,
something. I'd eat only trail mix and canteen water or whatever. But yeah, I mean, people used to do that, and I'm sure there were bad things that went on. I mean, it was a time when the media didn't cover like everything nationally. I mean, I don't think as many bad things went on, but it wasn't a completely innocent era. I mean, there were runaways and
yeah, they were
and
crazy
things
stuff,
that
but
were
I
going,
remember
crazy people that
hitchhiking
were
in
going on. I mean, there was a time or two where I had to threaten people to pick me up that I wanted to get out of the car, that I thought they were like not driving well, or that their intentions were bad, in one way or another. And I'd say, stop or I'll kick your ass, you know. But it was few and far between.
yeah,
And most of the people would pick you up and go, "Where are you going, man?"
yeah,
And I went to Woodstock. And did you? And you go, "No, I didn't. I saw the movie, and I knew some people that worked on it." But no, it was, and they, oh, that's cool. And yeah, you'd end up camping somewhere by the side of the road, and they'd go, they'd go through a couple states, and then your ways would part. Excuse me. So it was a simpler time in that sort of way. Um, but it's, yeah, and it's definitely in terms of the film business and the studio system, it was nowhere like that was. I mean, I'm, without mentioning names, there was an episode at the studio where one of the executives, that was a very well-regarded woman who was sort of being groomed for a very top spot, was ratted out at their weekly meeting, because people said that she reeked of marijuana. She wasn't smoking it there, but she would have a habit, I guess, of driving up to the top of the parking structure and blowing off her reefer before she went into the meeting. And that was the cause of her being like fired.
right.
And I'm just saying, when I first started in the business, that would, people would just be doing that openly, around the table, so it's just a complete change of pace.
Did you ever meet like Stanley Kubrick?
No,
No, I would have loved to have met Stanley Kubrick.
he was working over in England mostly.
No, I know, but I hear, he was one of my favorite
Yeah,
directors.
no, I stood in line overnight to get tickets to The Shining
Yeah.
when it first came out, but I never met Stanley Kubrick.
Who have you met that they say that you should never meet your idols. Have you ever met somebody that you just You see, this has happened to me where I was just dying to meet this person, thrilled to meet them, and they turned to be complete and utter assholes, and it just destroyed me. And then people told me, "Oh, this guy, like like he's a mean person. Don't get him angry. Don't do that." And he turned out to be a sweetheart. It was just very,
Yeah,
I
well, different people react to different people different ways. I would say it's hard to hold that to a fast and true rule of thumb. But I don't know. I've met a lot of people, but I never, I was always in awe of a lot of the actors because and then sort of taken aback when I met them personally because they always seemed so short and small. I mean, I was used to seeing them in 50 feet tall and
yes,
filling the screen. And when you meet them in person, they don't you really, I mean, pre days of like celebrity everything, they just they just seem to be more or less normal people in a way, and it just
yeah.
it was kind of shocking almost to see them like that, I guess.
But this day and age, what I find, and this is just my personal, the way I see it, is with the way things are. Back then, celebrities you didn't know it. Like, I don't like TMZ. I don't watch TMZ.
Yeah.
I don't need to know. Like, they showed a thing that really bugged me. They showed what's her name? Kurt Russell's wife. Um, what's her name? She was,
Yeah, Goldie Hawn.
Goldie Hawn. They showed her and they said, "Look how old she is now. Look at her
Oh yeah, I hate
wrinkles. Look at
that
her."
sort of stuff.
I'm just sitting there going, like,
I'll
why?
tell I'll tell you a time I was intimidated by celebrity. I guess I would say is I was in New York on a do screenings on a film that I cut, and the producers paid me to like show it to Paramount and a couple of studios that were like centered in New York. And I remember going to, I think the studio stage one or studio one. They had a screening room there, and I was shocked that New York projectionists don't rewind reels. To me was like beyond the pale. How do you go from one screen to another when everything's tails out?
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah,
they go, well, their union doesn't let them do that
yeah.
or something. And I go, well, come on, I'm like, I'm a union person too, and I got like screening down the street in an hour. I gotta get it, rewound ahead. I don't have time for everything being tails out. I gotta get taxis. I gotta like get over there. And they wouldn't do it. But I said, so can I use your equipment? They go, yeah, 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 sure, help yourself. So I would like rewind these things. I'd be back. I was supposed to sit in with the people that were watching it if they let me, because the producers wanted me to tell them whether they were reacting positively or negative to the movie while it was screening, if that was possible. I'd go in there and say I'm going to control the sound or something like that, but I couldn't do any of that because I had to be back in the projection room rewinding reels. So I got out of there and I was going over to Paramount. I actually caught like a taxi in New York. It was raining, and it was like I had 3 Goldbergs, and it was like it was worth like $1 million because it was irreplaceable at that time because
Right.
it was just work print. This is before you had everything digitally stored or whatever. This was like all the labor of the entire editing process was in this one work print that I was hustling around. And this guy, I had 2 Goldbergs in the back of the taxi seat, and I was reaching for the third one on my little hand cart, and some guy like jumps into the back of the taxi and tries to commandeer it. So I like pulled him out by the feet and like threw him on the sidewalk and said, it's my taxi, or whatever. It was like the weirdest thing. I'm not a New Yorker, so but my mom was from New York, so something kind of New Yorky kind of came over me, and I just
Right,
I
right.
just knew what I had to do, which is
Yeah.
get rid of this guy. So I got my, not lose the reels. I wasn't going to let him drive off with 2 of those reels. So I got in the thing. I was soaked by this point, and I got over to Paramount. I was in the elevator with the film going up to their top floor where the screening rooms were, and on one of the floors, the door opens, and in walked Mike Nichols, Meryl Streep, Jack Nicholson, and Sam Osteen, who was Mike Nichols' editor. I knew Sam because he had married the daughter of one of the guys I used to assist for. So, but I was like, I looked like this drowned rat with this thing, and I was there to show Paramount the Hamburger, the motion picture. So Sam asked me, what am I doing there? I go, I'm here to show, like, the president of Paramount, Hamburger, the motion picture, to like Meryl Streep and Jack Nicholson. And I just kind of went, oh, there could be better places to be right now than that. It's like,
Right.
it was like, how many Academy Awards are in this elevator?
Yeah.
But they were very gracious, and actually, nice, and they said hello, and kind of, no one looked at me like I was, some weirdo from outer space or something. I guess because Sam, introduced me, but I was mortified. I
Yes.
had nothing to say to them. I just,
Like, do some guys do that? Like, I always tell myself that uh I'm not going to get intimidated, you know. And then you meet somebody famous like that, they throw you right off,
yeah, they
because
can.
they just I don't know if they know that they have that kind of power. They
Some of them,
must.
some
They
of them
must.
do. I think a lot of them do. But
Jack Nicholson must know that just to get a look from him, uh, you know, you would get that, okay, yes sir, no sir,
I
uh,
was scared of Clint Eastwood.
but I love see the I remember um an agent took me, she's like, we want you to your scene is, what you're supposed to do is when the movie star comes out, you're supposed to scream and yell. And I go, I can't, that's not me. I don't scream, I don't yell. You know what I mean? That's not me. So i- in my head, the only, like, I just can't. But the only person I think I would faint, like, and that would be Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, well, I was working in his office on Swordfish. At the beginning of Swordfish, we didn't have an office, and the editor hadn't been hired yet, so I was like assisting on dailies, and my friend was in negotiations to come onto the picture. Anyway, so I was there working and temporarily, because they didn't have an office. And Clint, I guess, was in between pictures. We were working in his little bungalow there
You
at
met
Warner.
Stephen, you've met Clint Eastwood?
Yeah, well, I have, but this was before I met him. They came to me like my first day there, and they said, "Whose car is like that? Like, like the blue Honda or whatever." I go, "I think it's mine." And he had his own little like parking lot off to one side at Warner Brothers. So he said, "You're in one of Clint's spots.
Oh
You
well.
better move that thing, or he's going to destroy your car." So I went, is he here yet? He goes, no, he's not in here, but he's due anytime. So I like ran out there and frantically like took it to the other side of the lot and ran all the way
Oh,
back so I wouldn't be, so I wouldn't lose time at work or whatever. And I was sweating bullets, but no, when I met him, he was very gracious. But but just my reputation alone, that was enough. They
oh
told me,
yeah.
you're gonna lose that car. No, I gotta get it. I gotta get it to the other side of the lot. Yeah, he
That's
was he was tough on parking spots.
Yeah, oh
Yeah,
yeah. That's
yeah.